Well, today we're looking at Jerusalem's past and present. Looking at the first 11 verses in Lamentations chapter 4. We're ready to move into chapter 4 now. We've seen the upside of chapter 3 with the infusion of some hope for a better situation. But as we move into chapter 4 now, we're going to move back into a darker side. If you remember, no, you wouldn't remember because we haven't been there, I guess. But there's a shift of structure from chapters 1 and 2. Chapters 1 and 2, each verse held 6 lines. But in chapter 4, each verse is built up of only 4 lines. And so it'll be a little bit of a briefer chapter. So we're going to return again, as I said a moment ago, to the dark side, and we're going to focus on Jerusalem corporately. Chapter 4 focuses on the aftermath of the third siege of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. This one is started about 586 BC, or 588 BC, as I recall, and the siege ended in 586 BC. So we had about a 2-year siege before the walls were breached. At that time, about 586 BC, the third wave of exiles took place. The first wave, the one including Daniel and friends, took place about 605 BC. The second one took place in about 597 BC with the exile of King Jehoiakim, or Jeconiah, or Coniah, whichever you happen to be, depending upon where you are in Scripture when you read about him. And the third wave, then, it'll be Zedekiah, who was a puppet installed by Babylon. He was exiled to Babylon after a failed attempt at rebellion. The rebellion consisting of refusing to pay tribute to Nebuchadnezzar. So, we're going to return to the funeral dirge mode. It's still in poetic form, but it's in the form of a funeral dirge. Aleph, verse 1, Lamentations 4:1. How dark the gold has become. How pure the gold has changed. The sacred stones are poured out at the corner of every street. Again, only 4 lines here rather than 6. So let me give you a slightly variant take on those lines. What used to spark as gold, it's now dull. Pure gold ain't what it used to be. What used to be sacred is no longer sacred, no matter where you look. And there are some who believe that the gold would refer to perhaps the elite group, the influential group, the ruling group, the religious group. It may refer to their downfall, their not being influential as they were. Most of those people would have been exiled immediately. And in what used to be sacred is no longer sacred, that could refer to religious, or it could just refer to the people. The gold, again, a metaphor for people, but it was an illusion. It could also have been an illusion to the gold items Babylon took from the temple. Virtually everything in the temple that was of value was taken from Jerusalem to Babylon to be placed in a pagan temple. So, but the next thing the poet tells us is that there were other metaphors for people of Jerusalem. Let's look at Bet, verse 2, Lamentations 4:2. The precious sons of Zion. This would refer principally to the people of Jerusalem. Weighed against fine gold, how they are regarded now, I'm adding the word now, how they are regarded as earthen jars, the work of a potter's hands. So let me restate those a bit. The real valuable items were the people of Jerusalem, the sons of Zion. And they were compared to fine gold in the golden days of Judah. Now, line 3, they are only as valuable, in other words, these people are only as valuable as earthen jars, a cheap product of some potter. Clay pots, by the way, were found everywhere in Jerusalem. They were considered expendable, replaceable, and of little monetary value. So he was saying that life has become cheap in Jerusalem. So let's go on to verse 3, Gimel. Have a look at how inhumane, gotta be careful of how many syllables again. We're going to look at how inhumane those remaining in Jerusalem had become. Not the Babylonians now. The Hebrews, the Israelites, the Judahites left in Jerusalem. After the exiles taken all out, most of the influential people, the people of means and that sort of thing, they were left with just the ordinary people, fundamentally the poor people, people who could not become an army if they were to coalesce. They simply didn't have it in them. So we're looking at Lamentations 4:3. Even jackals, Jackals, a version of a African dog, even jackals offer the breast. They nurse their young. But the daughter of my people, that would be the daughters of Zion, the daughter of my people has become cruel, like ostriches in the wilderness. So what does this have to do with ostriches? Well, let's go ahead and translate these 4 lines a bit, and then we'll talk about that. Even the lowly, miserable jackals, the wild jackals, care for their young, and they nurse them. But, line 3, the girls of Jerusalem are cruel as wild ostriches. What does that mean? Well, nursing women during the siege and beyond experienced the drying up of their milk, so they couldn't nurse. They couldn't nurse. The mothers in Jerusalem were being compared to ostriches, and the female ostrich carelessly lays her eggs in the dirt, where the eggs could be trodden into the dust by anything walking over the top of it. They were ostrich mothers were incapable of caring for their young. They simply didn't. They laid the eggs in the dirt and walked away. We can get a bit of that in Job chapter 39, verses 13 through 16. Let me read them. The wings of the ostrich beat idly. Her plumage is lacking in pinions. When she leaves her eggs on the ground and deposits them in the sand, unmindful that a foot may crush them, the eggs, that the wild beasts may trample them, she cruelly disowns her young and ruthlessly makes naught of her brood. This was a conversation taking place in Job. Sounds out of place, but it wasn't. You wish to know what it was? You can go back, as in Job 39, verses 13 through 16. Well, how about Dalet, verse 4? Lamentations 4:4. The four lines look this way. The tongue of the infant cleaves to the roof of its mouth because of thirst. So infants did not have enough to drink. They were thirsty. The little ones ask for bread, but no one breaks it for them. So what does that tell you? The infants were both thirsty and hungry. They did not have enough to drink nor enough to eat. So it tells of the plight of the very young. And let me translate those four lines this way. Even the young has a dry mouth. Its tongue sticks to the roof of its mouth. Youngsters are starving, looking for bread, but no one produces any bread. Hech, verse 5, Lamentations 4:5. Lamentations 4:5. Those who ate delicacies, that is the wealthy, are desolate, not seen in the streets. Those reared in purple, again indicating wealth, embrace ash pits. So those who ate delicacies, you don't find them hanging around anywhere. Those reared in purple, they're in the ash pit now. Let me read those translated in my language. You don't see any rich out and about. They've vanished from the streets. Those having the riches of purple sit in ash heaps. The sins of the wicked, of the wealthy, this is not part of Scripture, this is my commentary. The sins of the wealthy have found them out. They're not out and about. They've vanished. They're not dressed well in purple. They're sitting in ash heaps. Ash heaps imply some kind of a problem, illness. Go back to Job again, this time in chapter 2, in verses 7 and 8. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with severe boils, from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. And he took a potsherd to scrape himself, to scrape the boils, as he sat among the ashes. Let's go on to Vav, verse 6. It comes to personal responsibility for this calamity. What's their suffering now? Who's responsible? Well, let's look at Lamentations 4:6. For the iniquity of the daughter of my people. So, who's responsible? We are. The iniquity of the daughter of my people is greater than the sin of Sodom. That's getting pretty nasty. Which was overthrown as in a moment. Sodom had no warning. Lot did, his family did, but nobody else did. Overthrow in a moment, and no hands were turned toward her. What's he saying? Well, the sin of the people in Jerusalem was worse than the sin of Sodom. Sodom got no warning. They were nobody around to help her. She was just decimated, the city. So, let me read my version of those 4 lines. The daughters of Zion are iniquitous. Their sin is greater than that of Sodom. Sodom was destroyed in moments without warning, and there was no one who turned to help. All of the pain and suffering that's come to Jerusalem as a consequence of the siege among the people, well, it was a consequence of sin among the people, resulting in the siege. Sin greater, at least in length of time, than that bringing destruction to Sodom. Zayin, verse 7. Lamentations 4:7. Her consecrated, that's Jerusalem's, consecrated ones were purer than snow. They were whiter than milk. I think they're speaking about their bodily form. They were more ruddy in body than corals. Coral is a reddish color, you understand. So this ruddy complexion would be considered good. Their polishing was like lapis lazuli, like a gemstone. So let me read 4 lines in my terms. Those consecrated as pure were purer than white milk, more ruddy than coil. They glistened like polished stones. The leaders of Jerusalem used to be beautiful in form, not so anymore. Let's go to Ket, verse 8, that tells us what the siege has brought to those who remain in Jerusalem. The few, the lowly, the humble. Lamentations 4:8, the 44 lines. Now, their appearance is blacker than soot. What did it say back in verse 7? Their appearance used to be white as milk. They are not recognized in the streets. So these people who were whiter than snow are now blacker than soot. Nobody even recognizes them. Their skin is shriveled on their bones. It is withered. It has become like wood, hard, crisp. So, let's look at another variant of that. Now, those who were white like milk are black as soot. No one recognizes them in the street. Their skin is shriveled to their bones, withered just like weathered wood. Our beautiful people aren't anymore. What used to be beautiful ain't. Tet, verse 9, Lamentations 4:9. Better are those slain with the sword than those slain with hunger. It would be preferable to die in battle than to starve to death. Pretty straightforward. For they pine away, being stricken for the lack of the fruits of the field. Now, let me look at those 4 lines in my lingo. Death is preferable to dying of hunger. Death by sword, quick death, is preferable to a slow death of hunger. Line 2, regarding how we and the young live. The living pine away as they are stricken because of nothing in the field. There ain't anything to gather to eat. Starvation and hunger now tear at the fabric of their society. Yud, verse 10, explain the extremes of behavior that come from the siege. They're dying of hunger now, so it's not going to be any surprise, I think, what we will see. The hands of compassionate women boiled their own children. They became food for them because of the destruction of the daughter of my people. What's he saying? It's so bad that mothers are boiling their children in order to eat them. My translation of those 4 lines: good, dedicated moms boiled their children to eat, for their children became food for them, O daughter of my people. The unbelievable had come to pass. Cannibalism, the eating of the most vulnerable among those remaining. Kaf, verse 11, as I remember the last of the verses we're going to look at, Lamentations 4:11. Now we see who is responsible. We know who is responsible as the causal agent ultimately is not the people whose sin brought this about, but God, who has brought this about as part of his judgment, of his discipline. But remember, as we saw in chapter 3, this also is proof of his remaining love for them. Hard to imagine, but that's what is being put forth. Lamentations 4:11. The Lord has accomplished his wrath. He has poured out his fierce anger. He has kindled a fire in Zion, which has consumed Zion's foundations. The lines from verse 11 again tells the people it was Yahweh bringing all this pain and suffering, as his wrath was kindled by their breaking of the covenant, mostly idol worship. In some ways, verse 11 is parallel to verse 6 and to the reference of Sodom. Well, my translation of these 4 lines, and then we'll be about finished. God has worked his wrath on us. This is the poet talking. Poured out his fierce anger on us. God has kindled a fire in Jerusalem among us, which has consumed Jerusalem's foundations around us. Seems like enough said to me. Next session, we're going to move to look at the corruption of the prophets and the priests of that time. As starters, we will be looking at 3 causes of the siege as are described next. And they're not the sins of the people, they are the sins of the prophets